scam, the Congress wants a joint parliamentary committee even as the government refuses to break its silence on the issue. Should the market regulator SEBI now step in and investigate? And what will be the political fallout of the Adani shock? That's going to be a big talking point on the news today. Also, just what does the new tax regime mean for you as a taxpayer? And we'll bring you an India Today impact, just how a hockey player who was a daily laborer could now be getting a job. All that and much more on the news today.
Presented by RP Sanjeev Goenka Group, Growing Legacies. Co-presented by Century Ply, आग से बचाए. Co-presented by Macho Hint, fashion बड़े आराम से. Hyundai Ioniq 5, the all-electric SUV.
Good evening and welcome. You're watching the Newstrack. I'm Rahul. The political fallout of the Adani Hindenburg saga is my top focus on the Newstrack tonight.
FPO scrapped, stocks spiral. Regulators to probe Adani companies. Adani assures investors.
Our board strongly felt that it would not have been morally correct to proceed with the FPO.
But will it be enough? What lies ahead for Adani? Big focus on Newstrack.
Here's a look at the headlines I'm tracking tonight. Big development in the Delhi Liquorgate case. Enforcement Directorate alleges that scam money was used to fund AAP's Goa campaign. Arvind Kejriwal calls the allegations fictional. Shaligram stones reach Ayodhya from Nepal. Hundreds gather to offer prayers to the rocks that will be used to build the idol of Lord Ram. YS Sharmila dares Telangana Chief Minister again, gifts shoes to KCR, asks him to walk with her for a day. Kerala journalist Siddiq Kappan walks out of UP jail after 2 years. He was booked under UAPA while he was on his way to Hathras after the rape and murder of a Dalit woman. Pakistan sinks deeper into economic crisis as the IMF rejects its debt management plan, calls it unrealistic. The Adani Group has lost $100 billion of valuation in 6 days. The withdrawal of the follow-on public offer also failed to stop the dramatic fall in Adani counters. The big question now is, how will the cancellation of the 20,000 crore rupee FPO impact the future growth plans of the Adani empire? According to sources, the current stock market sentiment could force the group to either raise high-cost debt or potentially have to scale back some of its ambitious growth plans.
After a fully subscribed FPO, yesterday's decision of his withdrawal would have surprised many. But considering the volatility of the market seen yesterday, our board strongly felt that it would not have been morally correct to proceed with the FPO.
Adani Group chairman's video statement hours after justifying the stunning withdrawal of Adani Enterprises FPO, putting paid to the group's ambitious plans to trim some of its mountainous debt and expand its operations. Adani Enterprises had planned to deploy 3,335 crore rupees immediately in the last 2 months of current fiscal and a total of 7,535 crore rupees over the next 14 months. As per the company's disclosure, 4,165 crore rupees was to be used for repayment of loans. 10,869 crore rupees was to be deployed in several projects of the green hydrogen ecosystem. Improvement works of certain existing airport facilities like the Ahmedabad Airport project and construction of Greenfield Expressway under its road and highway subsidiary. The FPO money was to come in 2 parts, half of the money at the time of the application and later on calls spread over 2 years.
अदानी एंटरप्राइज का ये एफपीओ बहुत ही सही समय पर आया है और हमारी 10 वर्षीय कैपिटल प्लानिंग का ये हिस्सा है जो कंपनी के फुल्ली फंडेड और डी रिस्क ग्रोथ प्लान के अनुरूप है. This decision will not have any impact on our existing operations as well as our future plans. We will continue to focus on timely executions and delivery of projects.
Adani Enterprises acts like a holding company for the group and has incubated new businesses in capital-guzzling infrastructure sectors. The company had actually planned to use the FPO funds for new sunrise businesses. Despite assurances by the group chairman, the bloodbath in the stock markets is expected to hit Adani Enterprises hard. The current stock market sentiment towards Adani Group will now force the Ahmedabad headquartered group to raise high-cost debt or scale back its ambitious expansion plans. With its share price dropping nearly 45% in the past 1 week, the company's power to raise loans against equity has also declined. The Hindenburg report has also international lenders to handle Adani Group bonds with kid gloves, with reports that at least 2 global giants have stopped accepting them as collateral for margin lending. The group may, as a result, be forced to raise funds at a higher rate than it traditionally has. The one big upside, though, is the group's commitment to green energy, for which the government has ensured easy funding. Bureau Report, Business Today TV.
Both houses of parliament were adjourned for the day because of the Adani Hindenburg saga and opposition parties launching a scathing attack on the centre, questioning the silence of the Prime Minister over the issue. Opposition parties are demanding a joint parliamentary committee or a Chief Justice of India designated committee to probe the finances of the Adani Group. Here's a report.
प्रश्नों से समस्याएं हल समाधान होती है. प्लीज जाइए अपने मिशन पर.
This is all that happened in Parliament today.
आज 2 बजे तक के लिए स्थगित की जाती है.
As the Adani controversy snowballed, the opposition had a one-point agenda for the budget session to demand answers from the government on the Hindenburg Adani papers. With the government making it clear that question hour will not be dropped, both houses were in session for a total of 6 minutes through the day.
The House stands adjourned to meet at 1100 hours on Friday, 3rd February 2023.
In a rare show of unity, opposition parties came together to raise their voice against the government and insist on an in-depth probe. The Congress led the fight both in and outside the House on the Adani showdown.
हमने एक नोटिस दी थी 267 के तहत और ये नोटिस पे हम चर्चा चाहते थे, लेकिन हर वक्त हमारे नोटिसेस रिजेक्ट होते हैं और महत्वपूर्ण जो विषय है, मुद्दे हैं, जब हम उठाते हैं तो उसको चर्चा का अवकाश नहीं मिलता.
Other parties have echoed Congress's stand, accusing the Prime Minister of shielding Adani.
अमृतकाल में ये महाघोटाला है और इस महाघोटाले पे सदन में चर्चा कराओ, सुप्रीम कोर्ट से मॉनिटर्ड इसकी पूरी जांच कराओ और जेपीसी बनाओ. इस डिमांड के साथ हम लोग पार्लियामेंट में अपनी आवाज आज भी उठाए हैं, आगे भी उठाते रहेंगे।
जिस तरीके से घोटाला हम देख रहे हैं 2014 से एक ही ग्रुप को जिस तरीके का फायदा हो रहा है, फोर्ब्स में नंबर 3 या 4 पे आ जाते हैं और अब गिरावट हो रही है, ये सिर्फ स्टॉक मैनिपुलेशन और स्टॉक की ओवर प्राइसिंग की वजह से हुआ है। इसीलिए हम चाह रहे हैं कि एक जॉइंट पार्लियामेंट्री कमेटी का गठन हो।
We want a proper investigation into what has happened, why this happened, and from the beginning. We can't just have these responses and close the chapter.
Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee meanwhile claimed that the government was close to collapse as a result of the market crash.
কালকে তো প্রায় সরকার পড়ে যাচ্ছিল। কেন পড়ে যাচ্ছিল? শেয়ার বাজারে ধস নেমেছিল। এবার কাউকে কাউকে রিকোয়েস্ট করে আমরা জানি তারা কারা, নামগুলো বলে আর আমি তাদের দুর্বিষহ করতে চাই না।
The showdown in Parliament is only likely to escalate in the coming days as the government has refused to budge, saying that the slotted discussion on the President's address must be allowed to go on. With the opposition breathing fire on the government over the Adani controversy, how long can the government hold off on a discussion in Parliament? Bureau Report, India Today.
There are two key questions at this moment. What happens in Parliament? What happens in the stock markets as a result of what's happening internationally after Credit Suisse? Now, Citibank has said that they will not be accepting Adani bonds as collateral. Could that potentially have a spiral effect? And how much do the political fireworks impact what's happening in the financial markets? Joining us on the broadcast at this time, I want to welcome first Hemendra Hazari, Independent Research Analyst with SEBI, Alok Churiwala, Managing Director at Churiwala Securities. He's been former Vice Chairperson of the BSE Brokers Forum, Abhishek Basu Malik, founder of IntelSense.in and QuantMental, Kranti Bathini, Director Equity Strategy at Wealth Mills, Supriya Srinath from the Congress. I want to go across first to India Today's Global Business Editor Udayan Mukherjee, who joins me on this broadcast. Udayan, the biggest question in the minds of people watching at this time is, when does this sharp and dramatic fall in the Adani counters really stop? Everybody thought a couple of days ago when the FPO got subscribed that this would be the bottom and potentially things could stabilize here. That didn't happen. The stocks have continued to fall. How long does this go on for there?
Well, it's very difficult to say that, Rahul, because every day brings a new twist to the tale. Like yesterday when the budget was on and markets were trading, we were all looking at how badly the stocks were plunging, and then later in the evening the FPO news came out, the withdrawal, which would have surprised quite a few people. So, this is very much an evolving story. One thing one can say safely is that this is not getting over in a hurry. Now, the pace of the fall will get arrested at some point, because the last time I calculated this, the Adani Group had lost more than 40% of its overall market value. Now, that is a staggering amount of loss in just a few days' time. Now, this pace of fall cannot continue. At some point, because nobody is suggesting that Adani assets have no value and 100 will go to zero. So, we are not going to the ground immediately. So, at some point, we will see some kind of stemming in the pace of fall of the Adani Group stocks, and some part of it is visible in today's trading session as well. But I want to talk about the withdrawal of the FPO, because it's not a very usual occurrence in India.
Okay, so explain that. Explain that to our viewers.
And then
Udayan, why is it that the FPO was withdrawn late after the budget was delivered? Because the FPO had finally got subscribed, even though it seemed a bit shaky initially. Ultimately, Gautam Adani was able to pull it through after having achieved full subscription. What, according to you, is the rationale for having called that FPO back and for withdrawing it?
I think there are two ways to look at it. The charitable way to look at it, or if you're being generous to Mr. Adani, you would believe his explanation that he's taken the high moral ground and therefore it's considered it the honorable thing to do by not exposing his new investors to a price risk straight away. But I think there is more to it than meets the eye. My suggestion would be that Mr. Adani, being a very shrewd observer and smart observer of the Indian market, would have figured that if this was to go through, then this would effectively close his doors to the Indian capital market forever, because people in the markets have long memories. If they got in on day one and day two, they lost 25% of the money that they put up, they would never forget it. And therefore, it would have been very difficult for the Adani Group to raise any capital ever again in the Indian market. So I think it's, even if you grant him that it was partly honorable in intent, I think you would also have to consider the fact that he was doing it to protect his own interests in the Indian capital market, particularly at a time when his global funding sources are going to dry up in the near future after what has happened with the Credit Suisse note yesterday. So I think it's to protect his future interest as much as to protect his shareholders from the fall.
We saw yesterday that Credit Suisse said they will not be accepting Adani bonds as collateral for their high net worth clients. We've seen Citibank do the same. Could that potentially be something that other financial institutes, banks start copying? And secondly, what impact does this have on Adani debt, which isn't with Credit Suisse or Citibank as much, but with the institutes that have the debt? Would they be looking at how strong their debt really is? Could there be a chance possibly of them wanting to call their debt back?
No, this is invariably going to have a knock-on effect, and I could see this coming even yesterday when the Credit Suisse note comes out. You see, Rahul, these international institutions all move in a herd. Even if you see the rating agencies, sometimes it's S&P first, then Moody's, then the rest. So if one big institution does it, then the other institutions will not be far behind in saying, okay, if they're not accepting that his bonds as collateral, then I will not do it as well. Because later they will be held accountable if they did not respond in the same way as some of these other institutions do. So I fully expect in the days to come that there will be more financial institutions in the West who would do the same thing by saying that we are not going to treat Adani bonds as collateral. But the bigger question is, what happens to the debt that has been given to the Adani Group from Indian financial institutions? Because the group has debt of nearly 2 lakh crores. Out of that, 40% is given by the Indian banking system. And that's a staggering amount of 80,000 crores, out of which 23,000 crores is the State Bank of India. And it doesn't surprise me that SBI was the stock which fell 10% during trading hours yesterday at the first sign of the budget trouble. And Punjab National Bank is 7,000 crores, IndusInd Bank 1.5% nearly, if you put all of them together, all of their exposures together, nearly 1.5% of their loan book is Adani Group. So there are specific banks who have significant exposures, and there is a lot of concern on whether this will trigger off a fresh round of NPAs for the Indian banking system, which has just come out of cleaning its balance sheets. I think it's premature to panic, because the one thing that I will say about the Adani Group is that they have some assets on the ground, because they have ports, they have airports, they have power plants, and many of them are actually functioning high-quality assets. So, and not to speak of the cement plants of Ambuja, which they have acquired. So I don't think it's so easy to conclude that loans which have been given to them cannot be recovered, even in the direst sense, by liquidating some of these assets, though it has not come to that at all.
The Hindenburg report draws people's attention to the leverage, the debt to EBITDA ratios, so how much debt do they have relative to their earnings, and the current ratios, which is how much liquidity do they have, current assets to current liabilities. If it were come to that, and if some of these banks, financial institutes, under pressure from the public, under pressure from the opposition, were to start calling for the debt back, what's your reading of the financial statements of the Adani Group? How comfortably placed are they at this moment to be able to service their debt obligations?
Asset sales are not that easy, Rahul, and they cannot be done overnight. And I think at this point in time, for Gautam Adani to come out and put an asset on the block would be very, very tricky. It would send out the worst kind of signals to not just his investors, but to everyone who's watching the group very closely now. I don't think it's an option, frankly, to put an asset on the block. Not for a moment am I suggesting that it has come to that already and he needs to sell an asset down to become liquid. But I think liquidity will become an issue because the gates are shutting with the likes of Credit Suisse and Citigroup, and this will have some kind of a contagion effect in his ability to raise liquidity overseas. In the Indian banking system, I think with the kind of panic which is going around, it will be a brave banker who provides a line of liquidity to the Adani Group right now. So it's a tricky situation. Now, I don't want to be alarmist out here and say that it's come to a point where the group is headed for bankruptcy. No. But I will give you one example, Rahul. Back in the day, a few years ago, many years ago, something like this, and the situation is not exactly comparable, I hasten to add, with the Anil Ambani Group. At that point, a lot of questions were asked about Anil Ambani Group. But then it was offered that he was sitting on big assets. He had power assets, he has infrastructure assets, road assets, metro rail projects. He had a mutual fund company. And then it turned out, you know the story and how it ended, that none of them was actually in the shape that it was in, or it was preferred to the market. So I can see some small parallels between the situation, and I'm sincerely hoping that this does not go the Anil Ambani way.
The Life Insurance Corporation of India is under fire for investing heavily in Adani Group shares. Now, the LIC statement says that they came in at much lower values. They've been able to make sufficient returns on their investments in LIC. However, given the sharp fall in the value of LIC shares, in the value of Adani counters, the gains that LIC had made are now on the verge of getting wiped off. Given the investment mandate of the Life Insurance Corporation relative to, say, a Canadian pension fund or any other international pension fund, does it seem awkward that LIC would be investing in stocks with such high promoter holdings, such limited public float? These are people's life earnings in pensions, and LIC went and invested them, and that's something that the opposition is looking to turn into a big deal.
I think it's a lot more than awkward, Rahul, but LIC has always had these kind of questionable investments, and I've been the sternest critic of LIC's investment strategies. It has been the go-to company for the government of India to bail out all kinds of companies. Whenever a company needs bailing out, whether it's an IDBI bank or somebody, the government just picks up the phone and LIC is out there seeing value in what nobody else sees value in. And it's just an indefensible position. And I think at some point there is a price to pay for it. And it is no coincidence that LIC stock has been such a big underperformer since the IPO happened, and investors have lost such a lot of money out there. Now, do you want to join the dots and say, where did the instruction to LIC come from, if it was such the case, to get into the Adani counter? Because this is a very murky area that we are going into. And this is the kind of tone that opposition parties would be singing today, because they would be singing the crony capitalism tune. And whether there was a white knight with instructions from New Delhi who was doing some kind of a bailout for the Adani, who's considered to be friendly to some people in power, I don't want to get into that. But because this is the realm of insinuation and stuff which cannot be proven. But I think it's free for all at this point in time. The one thing that one can say with some certainty is that LIC has been known and has a track record for very, very imprudent investments, and this will probably go down as one more in those line of investments.
Now, what's your advice to retail investors at this moment? Because there are two divergent points of view. One set of investors feel that they missed out on the hockey stick-like jump in Adani counters. Those prices are now at far more reasonable price-earning multiple ratios, and therefore this may be a good time to enter, especially some of the more robust businesses. The other is that, hey, we don't fully understand the gravity of what's going on. No one seems to be able to predict where the bottom is, and therefore don't jump in and try and invest when you don't know how far the stocks are going to fall. So how are you seeing that? If investors are looking to you for a broad suggestion what to do, what would be your take to them?
Rahul, it's a falling knife at this point in time. And it's very difficult to advise going out and catching a falling knife, because you just don't know where the dust will settle with this one. If I were being honest with you, I would have said that this last 30-35% of the fall of the last couple of days, I frankly didn't see it coming. I thought that a lot of the damage was done in the first 2 or 3 days, and maybe nerves would begin to settle. But I think there is more smoke, more fire behind this smoke, and which is why this issue is refusing to die down. And therefore, it would be very, very improper of me to go out and advise people to go out and buy stocks. But having said that, I would suggest one thing, that you look at Adani Group companies, as not one homogeneous entity. I'll give you an example. You can look at Adani Enterprises, which is facing the biggest amount of rout. It's in the Nifty and it's going down at the average of 20% a day. Now, that probably will bear the biggest brunt in case there is a liquidity issue with the Adani Group. There is none today, to be sure, but if there were to be, then I think Adani Enterprises is the one that is clearly, as you can see in the stock prices, falling the hardest. But they also own Ambuja, and Ambuja till a few months ago had nothing to do with Adani. Ambuja is a world-class cement asset which is falling because the ownership lies with Adani right now. It has strong cash flows, doesn't have any great debt on its book which it cannot service from its cash flows, and it is falling because of the sentimental linkage with the Adani Group. So if you want to cherry pick assets because they have fallen in the last few days, then consider the ones which are falling only because of an umbilical cord of sentiment with the Adani Group, but not because a drying up of Adani Group liquidity actually affects their operations in a single way. This is again no recommendation to go out and buy Ambuja at all, far from it. But I think that probably makes more sense, or even an Adani Ports, than to look at something like an Adani Enterprises at this point in time. But again, no recommendation at all.
Thanks for that, Udayan. Some sharp insights there from India's top markets guru, Udayan Mukherjee. He's here for a few more days. We will keep getting insights from him on how this story shapes from here. Let's talk a bit about what's happening in Parliament. Supriya Srinit from the Congress is with us. Supriya, sources in the BJP say this has nothing to do with the government. This is a private group and they need to answer for their own actions. And why link this with the government? Yes, there are certain research reports that have come out. That's something that's being looked at. This has nothing to do with the BJP government at all. So don't link us. And why is the opposition trying to stall Parliament?
Well, they would well say that, but are you willing to take that at face value? Because the individual in question has on record, and the Prime Minister on record, spoken about their relationship. The Prime Minister first as Chief Minister and then as Prime Minister conducted his election campaigns on his planes. There are pictures of them together. Everybody knows how that monopoly came into being. Everybody knows how from 680th number in the world of richest people in the world, Mr. Adani jumped to number 2. So, I mean, let's not take everything that the BJP sources say at face value. I really want to take the debate forward because I heard you have a conversation with Udayan on LIC. And I think questions need to be asked and they also need to be answered. And where else but the Indian Parliament? Because LIC and SBI are huge financial giants institutions. LIC has 30 crore policy holders. SBI has 45 crore account holders. Both of these institutions have huge exposure to the Adani Group.
No, but you saw in that statement pulled out by LIC that they said that the LIC said in that statement that they put out that Adani chips that they invested in were investment grade as per their investment mandate, and therefore it fit into their investment mandate. And B, they said they entered at about 30,000 crore rupees. The value of the stocks at that time was 50,000 crore rupees. So they said we've made substantial returns. So who's the pressure to question what we are doing and why? It fits into our investment mandate.
That's a fake and specious argument if you ask me. And I will tell you why. Because in Finance 101, there is something called the time value of the rupee. If 10 years back, you invest 100 rupees and 5 years later, that 100 becomes 1,000. But again, 5 years later, at the end of 10 years, it becomes 200. You don't say my 100 has become 200. You mourn the fact that the 1,000 has become 200. And that is exactly how finance and debt markets around the world work. That concept is called mark to market. Any financial journalist or any financial expert will tell you mark to market is how financial institutions work. That's how CAGR, the compounded annual growth rate, is reported. So this is absolute hogwash by the LIC. Quite frankly, the LIC, which took money of policy holders, has squandered that money on an asset which was rather risky. And if you ask me, if I may go ahead and actually, step ahead and say something, it's a diversified institution and they have to be answerable to the people of this country because the government of India is a majority shareholder. Why is the government shying away from a debate in Parliament? Why is the government shying away from a JPC? Joe Johnson, the director on Elara Capital, has had to quit his position. Heads are rolling at Elara Capital, but heads are not rolling at SBI and LIC, and not a squeak from the Security and Exchange Board of India, the SEBI, which is supposed to protect the minority shareholders. What about the minority shareholders of Adani Group or the crores of shareholders in India's stock markets? Who's ring fencing them? Who's protecting them? Is the government not responsible? And everybody knows the bonhomie that Mr. Adani has shared with Mr. Modi, the complete monopoly that he has created at the behest and with the good wishes of the government. So let's not shy away from that. Mr. Adani is a leading monopoly in ports. He's a leading monopoly in airports. He's a leading monopoly in foods and agriculture, including godowns, warehouses, seed, edible oil, food, all of that. He's a leading monopoly in renewable energy and he's a leading monopoly in cement. He has about 10 listed entities. He's going to list 5 more in 2023. All of those sectors intrinsic to India's economic growth story. And the economic growth story can't fall apart because one man decided to overvalue his shares by 42 times, or that he's saddled with debt, or the fact that there was huge round tripping happening. And 1 second, Rahul, one last thing that I want to say. In July 2021, the finance minister told Lok Sabha that Adani Group was being investigated by SEBI. It's been 18 months. What has that investigation led to? Can the Modi government keep quiet? Can institutions and regulators look the other way? Where is institutional accountability? That is what we are asking.
Abhishek Basu Malik. Now, there are those who support the Adani Group who will say, the market attaches a certain valuation. It's not Mr. Adani who's sitting and doing his own valuation. The market attaches a certain valuation to Adani stocks. He has shown greater ambition, greater hunger, greater audacity than most other Indian groups, and his market value has gone up. Now there's a research report, the markets are reacting negatively to that. This will settle at some point in time, but there is no criminal culpability that is proven in any way, and therefore why should Parliament be stalled? I mean, what sense does this make? This is a matter for the financial markets, and that's the way it should be dealt. You're looking at all that's going on. How do you respond to what we're seeing in Parliament and in the markets?
So, very difficult to actually discuss what is going on in Parliament. I think, that will take its own course. But I can definitely talk about what's going on in the market. And, in the markets, we've seen this before. Whenever we see a particular stock or a particular set of stocks as an industry, which goes up beyond a certain, intrinsic value, a part of it comes from the cash flows and a part of it comes from sentiment. Now, sentiment, as long as it was strong, it was going up. Today, sentiment has weakened. So it's like a pendulum, right? So now the pendulum is swinging on the, downwards. So that is what is exactly happening right now.
No, it is. But how long do you see this go on for? And the issues that are being raised by Supriya Shrinate and those in the opposition about the need for a probe, whereas those who will support the group will say, the market is showing certain volatility. Mr. Adani himself has acknowledged that. And at a certain point in time, this froth will settle and the market will find a new low and then life goes on as normal.
Yeah, I mean, I think like Udayan said earlier, it's anybody's guess where the low is going to be because, in an environment where news flow is so strong, and we are getting news which is coming in every day, maybe, multiple times a day, it's very difficult for, stock to understand where the bottom is going to be and how the stock is going to react. So, technically, probably we are close to a 200-week moving average. But in a very news-driven kind of environment, those kinds of things have no meaning, right? It can fall further. It could stop tomorrow for all we know. I mean, it's absolutely impossible for anyone to predict what is going to happen, especially when there is so much of news flow that's happening.
Okay, let me get a perspective also from Alok Churiwala. No, one second, let me get a word in from everyone. Supriya, I'm just coming back to you in a moment. Alok Churiwala, you're seeing what's happening in the markets and outside. Also, questions being asked about the Life Insurance Company of India and their investments in different Adani counters.
Yeah, so, there are only questions at this point in time, and everyone, including the markets, is searching for an answer. And that is probably the reason why we are seeing that the markets are tanking every day. The question remains the timing of the report being put out on the eve of the FPO. The question remains that there was a short seller behind it. The question remains that weapons of mass destruction like the futures and options are being used to depress the stock prices. The question remains that what is the actual valuation? Question remains, when will this stop? We don't have answers as of now, and the market players, including us, is searching for answers. Till then, the biggest advice to investors is stay away from the counters, stay away from the Adani counters, let the dust settle in. Dust will settle. At some point in time, it will. Till then, everybody will have to do soul searching. Right from the powers that be, to the regulators, to the exchange administration, to market players, we are all in it together. You mentioned about LIC. It's a question of damned if you do and damned if you don't. Today, when the stock was doing well, that is not the time the questions were asked. That is the time everyone was enjoying the fruits of success. But today, when the chips are down, the questions are going to be asked, and rightly so. But again, the point of the matter is, eyesight is perfect, 20/20 in hindsight, and how does a fund manager, and any fund manager, take a call? What needs to be bought, what not?
Okay, let Supriya Shinde respond to that important point, that when that particular fund manager, who on behalf of LIC took the call to invest in these Adani counters, and the shares ran away in the way that they did, he would have been considered inside LIC the smartest guy in the building. Now, when the stocks have started falling, questions are being asked, the knives are out, the likes of Alok Churiwala would say, but hindsight is always 20/20.
Okay, let's get one thing right here. And I'm saying that with all responsibility that I carry to the show. There is no way that this carnage in Indian markets or the Adani counters is happening on account of one report alone. That report has exposed the fault lines that exist within the group. Why is it that of the total 80,000 crore rupees, which is about 38% of all of Adani Group's debt, only 8% comes from private banks and 30% from public sector banks? Explain that to me. Why is it that public sector banks were lending to Mr. Adani despite knowing the fault lines that exist, and why did private banks stay away? Nobody can explain that. The only reason they did is because they assessed risk better. And that is the question I'm raising. LIC, whoever may be the smartest guy in the room, he should actually be saddled and asked some very tough questions. That you were taking positions on money that was being raised by policy holders. Absolutely, आम भारतीयों का पैसा जो इस विश्वास से डालते हैं कि आप जिंदगी के बाद भी और जिंदगी के साथ भी उनके साथ रहिएगा. Who was LIC trying to ensure? That is the question one is trying to raise here. And you cannot get away by saying that we've made some profits. Yes, some of our loss, some of that stuff has been eroded. Mark to market, you stand exposed. You exposed LIC and money of policy holders, about 30 crore of them, to a very risky asset. It's quite as simple as that. Whoever was talking about phone call banking needs to answer some tough questions, beginning with Mr. Narendra Modi. He cannot be silent on this. Where is the SEBI chief, Madhvi Puri? Have you heard one squeak from her?
But she hardly speaks. No, one second. On the Madhuri Puri Butch issue, where has she ever spoken? She doesn't speak. So they need to act through whatever they're doing, and there's some reports of them having taken notice, etc., etc.
That's very comfortable. She may have never spoken. I have known her in her previous avatar as a banker. I have known her in her previous avatar as a private equity investor, and she was very vocal. This is the time for SEBI chief to come out, assuage the markets, tell what is happening, and launch a full probe. July 2021, the finance minister says there's a probe on. Where is the report of that probe? I would want to know. I mean, Mr. Adani said, I have been tested by the regulator and I stand, I stand firm. Did he lie to the investors? And Rahul, one last thing I want to tell you. It was on the 10th of September 2008, Lehman Brothers told Wall Street everything was good. They said there's a strong balance sheet and there is robust business. On the 15th of September, 5 days later, they filed for bankruptcy. So let us not get carried away with what is happening. As far as the counters are concerned, the government of India, LIC and SBI is answerable. There has to be a probe into this by the JPC, and Parliament should question and should get answers from Adani and the government of India.
Kranti Batini, the counter to what Supriya is saying is that the Adani Group actually owns some very valuable assets, ports, airports, cement, and these assets have real value. Now, there may be froth at the top of the counters. That froth will settle, and then the group will discover its actual value. It may push some of their ambitious plans back a few years, may not look quite as dramatic as it did earlier and quite as impressive, but the stocks have value. So unlike some of the victims or some of the targets of the Hindenburg research who had notional experimental products that they were hyping, here is a situation where the group in a very exciting country like India, which is growing at the rate at which India is, has real assets on the ground, and at some time this volatility will settle. We just don't know when that time is, but at a certain point in time this volatility will settle, and therefore it's wrong to compare with Lehman.
Rahul, first of all, stocks, when the stocks are in uptrend, they seems to be innocent until proven guilty, and stocks are in downtrend are guilty until proven innocent. So when the stocks are of Adani Group, they're in uptrend, there looks like innocent and everybody had a feeling of missing out. When they're coming down, they need to now prove as innocent, first of all. Coming to your point, Adani Group, as for the data what they release in the public domain, they have a debt of around 1,85,000 lakh crores as on date. That is the publicly available data. And out of this, in last 3-4 years, they have done the acquisitions around 1.55 lakh crores. This is as per the available data. So whatever be the debt they have that has been went for acquisition of different companies at different values at over a period of time. Now coming to the point whether the what kind of exposure the banks wants, it can be the public sector and the private sector bank. Udayan have explained each banks how much they carries. And as per the disclosure that received from various banks, both the public as well as the private sector banks, all these debts have been covered with a good collateral. So right now, and also if we see the first half of the year, the EBITDA of Adani Group, it comes around 24,000 crores. This is from the available data. So for the first half, if they are doing 24,000 crores, and for the full year, if they are doing somewhere around 50,000 crores, for a debt on 1,85,000 crores, if a company is giving a EBITDA of 50,000 crores, so there is nothing panic immediately for the retail investors. They have the cushion and a comfortable position to cover the debt at this moment. So, but market have a process when the stocks, if you see the stock performance from past 4-5 years, the stock on an average Adani Group shares have delivered around 820% returns. So this is the quantum of value they created over a period of time. But due to the recent situations, the stock has been in a downtrend right now. But as for the fundamentals and the available data is concerned, they have good cash flows to cover the debts at this point of time.
Okay, Hemendra Hazari, Supriya Srinath questions the role of the regulators in India. We've seen Credit Suisse, Citibank internationally take action. We haven't heard from the regulators on what they're intending to do, if anything at all.
That is really a major mystery why the regulator has chosen to be silent. I can understand if this was a small company where the share price had fallen, but this is a very major conglomerate. there's been a loss in market value of over $100 billion. Not only there are loss in valuation, there are significant allegations of money laundering, of round tripping, of dubious and opaque companies. Now, it is the duty of the regulator to step in. Hindenburg made allegations, the company totally refuted it, and the market has gone with Hindenburg. But the market can also be wrong. It is up to now the regulator to step in and to provide clarity what is going on.
No, but this is you make a very important point, because the fact also is that while all these questions are being asked of the Adani Group, Supriya, and you've been a business journalist in the past, the motives of the short seller, they're not doodh ka dhula at all. They've come out with a research report. They took positions on derivatives linked to the Adani counters internationally. They are wanting to make a killing. Therefore, I think one of our experts made the point that you're kind of assuming that they are guilty till they are proven innocent. And on the other side, you have somebody who you very clearly knows has a vested financial interest in what he's saying.
So, दूध का दूध पानी का पानी कर लीजिए. Let the regulator launch a probe into this carnage of the last 4 days, and let the regulator also find out the overvaluation of shares and the alleged round tipping, the formation of shell companies, how people, how a Chinese firm, Grami International, and Vinod Adani have the same address. Let the regulator find all that out. It is only going to come to light when the regulator launches a probe. Apparently, there was a probe on since July 2021, results of which are unknown. Quite frankly, Rahul, and I say this again with some responsibility and seriousness, this is India's shareball moment, like it happened in Korea or the Kabatsu moment of Japan. Adani is not some small, petty private enterprise. He is India's richest business conglomerate. He has business interests, like I said, in ports, and these are all monopoly interests, by the way. Ports, airports, food, agriculture, renewable energy, cement. He has
not really. These aren't monopoly.
Intrinsic to the India growth story.
No, of course they are. And these are not monopoly interests. A lot of the ports, a lot of the airports, a lot of the other projects which they've won have actually been won through tender. Everybody could have jumped in. Mr. Adani showed greater aggression or greater ambition, or he was more muscular in his approach.
Absolutely disagree with you.
A lot of this anyway. So now this is in the realm of
Adani's rise. Mr. Adani's rise has happened at the behest of the Indian government, allowing him to create a monopoly with the political patronage of the Prime Minister. There is no other way to assess
but most of these sectors, it isn't a monopoly. In cements, for example, he's gone out and bought Ambuja, ECC. It's not a monopoly. Anyway, the last word hasn't been spoken. The markets have a mind of their own. We're seeing what's happening internationally.
Food, agriculture.
And we're also seeing the opposition with its knives out. Mr. Adani has dealt with many adversity in the past. This, make no mistake, is the biggest challenge he's had to face. He's a fighter, and now he's fighting the fight of his life. Will he, at the end of it, there's battering and there's bruising, but will he, at the end of it, emerge out of the storm, or will the storm take him down? Let's see what happens over the next several days. And we'll track it as objectively, as neutrally, as factually, and as bipartisan a fashion as we possibly can. We're just putting out the facts straight as they are and telling you the story for what it is. We're slipping into a break. I'll have more for you when we come back from the other side.
A university founded by the world's first non-European Nobel laureate. More than 100 years later, Vishwa Bharati at Rabindranath Tagore's Shanti Niketan locked in a land dispute with another Nobel Prize winner, Professor Amartya Sen. The university has accused the 90-year-old of occupying a portion of campus land in excess of his entitlement. Professor Sen has disputed the claim and accused the central institution of harassment. Earlier this week, West Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee stepped in. She stood beside the elderly economist, a vocal critic of the Modi government and the BJP. The CM produced land records she insisted supported Professor Sen's complete entitlement of the land under his possession. The Chief Minister also alleged saffronization attempts on Vishwa Bharati's campus. The West Bengal Chief Minister sought Prime Minister Narendra Modi's intervention, saying she would write a formal letter to him in this regard. The university has responded. Vishwa Bharati has instead accused the state chief minister of listening to sycophants. A new political war in West Bengal with an academic institution and icons at its center. Bureau Report, India Today.
Here on board the Newstrack, a sea of devotees descended on the streets of Ayodhya to get the darshan of the centuries-old holy rocks. They will be used to carve out the idols of Lord Ram and Ma Sita in the splendid Ram temple that is set to open on the 1st of January 2024. This is where we wrap up the Newstrack tonight. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow evening at 8. Goodbye. Goodbye.
भारत के वित्त मंत्री निर्मला सीतारमण जी ने इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर को हाईएस्ट प्रायोरिटी दी है। हमारा बजट भी काफ़ी बड़ा हुआ है, जिसके कारण आने वाले समय में हिंदुस्तान के रोड इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर में जो हमने निर्धार व्यक्त किया है कि वर्ल्ड स्टैंडर्ड के रोड बनेंगे, वो उद्दिष्ट हम निश्चित रूप से पूरा कर सकेंगे। ग्रीन एनर्जी, ग्रीन पावर, हर जगह पर जो ग्रीन बात के उल्लेख किया गया, वो हमारी इकोलॉजी एंड एनवायरनमेंट को प्रोटेक्ट करने की दृष्टि से एक बहुत बड़ी पहल है। मैं मानता हूं कि इस बजट की विशेषता ये है कि हमारे आम आदमी के जीवन में जो एयर पोल्यूशन, वाटर पोल्यूशन की जो समस्याएं गंभीर है, वो ग्रीन अप्रोच के कारण निश्चित रूप में हमारे क्वालिटी लाइफ में काफ़ी बड़ा सुधार होगा। मिडिल क्लास के बारे में सोचा नहीं जाता था, इस बार पहली बार मिडिल क्लास को भी काफ़ी राहत दी गई है। गांव, गरीब, मजदूर और किसान का कल्याण करने वाला और प्रधानमंत्री मोदी जी के नेतृत्व में आत्मनिर्भर भारत का सपना पूरा करने वाला और हिंदुस्तान को वर्ल्ड की इकोनॉमी में एक सुपर इकोनॉमिक पावर बनाने के लिए ले जाने वाला ऐसा ये बजट है। स्क्रैपिंग के लिए जो विशेष रूप से हमारी रिसाइकलिंग इंडस्ट्री थी, उसके बारे में राज्य सरकार और भारत सरकार दोनों जगह अब नई गाड़ी आएगी, जिससे प्रदूषण कम होगा और निश्चित रूप से स्क्रैपिंग के कार्य को भी काफ़ी बड़े इससे शुरुआत हो जाएगी। बहुत अच्छा बजट निर्मला जी ने दिया है, मैं उनका बहुत बहुत अभिनंदन करता हूं और ये बजट प्रधानमंत्री मोदी जी के नेतृत्व में हिंदुस्तान को भविष्य में प्रगति और विकास की ओर ले जाएगा, ऐसा विश्वास व्यक्त करता हूं।
She is one of India's most recognizable international faces. She has acted in films in languages that range from Hindi to Tamil to Telugu to Kannada to Malayalam to Bengali to even Hungarian, French and Italian. But did you know that none of these are Aishwarya Rai's native language? If you did not already know, it's the beautiful ancient language Tulu from coastal Karnataka. But why are we telling you about Aishwarya's mother tongue? Well, because the Bombay government in Karnataka has just set the ball rolling to give Tulu status as the state's second official language after Kannada.
The government has finally formed a committee under the supervision of Mohan Alva to submit a report within 1 week to the state. With elections around the corner, the long pending demand of the people of coastal Karnataka is finally being fulfilled, the part of Karnataka which exported talent across the country and the globe.
Native Tulu speakers number about 1.8 million and are concentrated in the coastal districts of Karnataka.
Matirla smile maltondu ತಾಟಿ ಬಡೊಂದು ಮಾತೆರ್ಲ ಮುಲ್ಪ ಸಮ್ಮಾನ್ ಮಲ್ಪನಾಗ patiently ಕುಲ್ದಾರ ಮಾತ್ರ.
But famous Tulu speakers are many. From Sunil Shetty to Shilpa Shetty to Pooja Hegde to KL Rahul to Prakash Raj, Anushka Shetty, Kadri Gopal Nath to Sandeep Chota. Tulu is a rich and vibrant language with a distinct culture, literature and traditions. The Tulu-speaking community has been demanding official recognition of their language for a long time, and they see this as a way to preserve their cultural heritage and promote their language. The demand for Tulu as an official language has been driven by a number of factors, including the growing number of Tulu-speaking people and their increased representation in the state's political and cultural landscape. Apart from the well-timed move right before elections, the recognition of Tulu as an official language could boost the local economy of an important part of Karnataka by creating job opportunities in language-related fields. Bureau Report, India Today.
Pathan Mania in January, Jawan Storm in June.
Good to go, Chief.
And then Donkey Tsunami in December.
नाम क्या है सर? डंकी. Donkey?
डोंकी नहीं शाहरुख, डंकी। मैं समझा डोंकी।
3 films in 12 months, all perfectly timed releases. That's Shah Rukh Khan for you all in 2023, the year when he rules like the king that he is. His third outing, Donkey, is as special as Pathaan and Jawan. In fact, it even has interesting facts that one should know, starting with its title. Donkey translates to illegal entry or illegal immigration in Punjab, and as the name suggests, the film will highlight the rampant use of an illegal backdoor route called donkey flight that Indians undertake to migrate to countries like Canada and the USA. What's more, SRK wrapped up Donkey.
Co-presented by Star Health Insurance, the health insurance specialist. Co-presented by Panasonic. Create today, enrich tomorrow.
Good evening, hello and welcome. You're with the news today. This is your primetime destination news. Newsmakers talking points Thursday night. The big story remains the Adani stock plunge. Tonight among my special guests is someone who's been a counsel in the past for the Adani Group. Hari Salve will join us to give us the Adani side of the story. We'll also have a political face-off